Today on campus, it's 1985. Only we're not in America. We're in Tokyo, Japan. In today's episode, a young couple, each from different parts of America, form an intimate relationship while studying overseas. When they suddenly learn she is pregnant, the two must make a life-altering decision 6,000 miles from home. We think this true story is unique. We've already published a touching episode on a college abortion, beautifully written and narrated by Marie Newman. But today's story is unique for the fact that the entire experience is told from a man's point of view. And that's a voice rarely heard. This is Once in College. I'm Pete Griffith. The man who shared this story asked to remain anonymous, not because he didn't want anyone to know who he is, but because he wants to protect the identity of the woman he once loved. It's been 40 years, but to this day, he still does not know whether she has shared her experience with anyone or would ever want to. The first time he told me what happened was over the phone. I knew the conversation was going to be heavy, so I set up a call for late in the evening when our families were out of the house or in bed. I remember sitting on my carpeted stairs halfway down the basement with the door shut behind me. I didn't want to forget or misrepresent any of the details, so before we started talking, he allowed me to record our conversation. 2 months after the call, and 3 drafts later, I still couldn't find a way to present it any better than how he had told it to me over the phone. So, in the end, we decided to simply read the transcript in its entirety, cutting out all my dialogue. Class is about to begin. Here are his memories of a scary event once in college. My junior year in college was 1985-86, the year the Bears won the Super Bowl. We in Chicago will always go back to that event as reference point for the 80s, no matter how far in the future we go. It feels like it'll be another 85 years before they win another one, but anyway, 85-86 was the year the Bears won the Super Bowl, and the year I spent a semester studying abroad. I was at Miami University and found a foreign study program that I liked just outside of Tokyo. The credits would all transfer, so I went. I just went on my own. For the first part of the year there, I was experiencing Japan and learning the language. I studied Japanese for a couple of years before I left, but I was in Oxford, Ohio, and you really can't learn Japanese in Oxford, Ohio. So the first semester I spent there became an intensive immersion in Japanese. I was in a small group of people who took the same course, and all we did was study Japanese. But as the year went on, I broadened my social base and met a bunch of other people from some California schools and became very close friends with some of them, including a Japanese-American woman. She was a Berkeley student studying in Japan. Her father happened to be assigned to Tokyo at the same time with a huge American company. So her parents were living there at an expat apartment. The apartment was beautiful. So she and I were in the same program at the same school. I started dating this woman, and we got very close. The larger group whittled down to the 4 of us, and we all became even closer. The 4 of us would hang out together all the time and, do what young people do. We were active in a lot of different things, traveling a lot, exploring this amazing country. She was a first-generation Japanese American, so her language skills were amazing. I was working on mine, which was always interesting, and it caused her to laugh at a whole different pitch when I would get things wrong, which caused me to laugh back. She and I would see each other for quite a while. Japan is an island nation, so it's an insular country. It's very hard to really break through the surface, especially at that time. There was a whole outsider culture that was deeply seated, and they had a name for a foreigner like myself that was kind of derogatory. We would ride together on a train coming home late at night after being out partying, and the Japanese businessmen would see me holding hands with a Japanese-looking woman and try to get us to stop holding hands. It was sometimes amusing, sometimes really obnoxious. I was away in Singapore when I called her. It was springtime, I remember, because I was traveling with another friend who joined me on a spring break trip to visit Thailand and Singapore. In the middle of that trip, I wanted to call my girlfriend to tell her all about it and that we were going to go on to Hong Kong. Back then, to make an international call, especially in Singapore, you had to find an international booth. It was like a special phone booth. So when I called her, it wasn't a casual thing to begin with, like texting each other. This was 1985, and so when I made the call, I was standing in an open telephone booth in a Singapore airport. It wasn't too long into that call that I learned she was pregnant. I remember a million emotions flying around. You just see that this is your life and it may be stretching out in front of you. You want to do what you think you should do. We both wanted to come back to Japan after we graduated or do something with our second language. This would have changed everything. So here we were. Her language ability was fluent. Mine was not. We were 21 years old and terrified, right? I mean, your life could take a major turn with something like that. And so we talked about it. She was terrified. But the one thing that we both knew we didn't want to do was be parents in our early 20s, because that was actually scarier than anything else. We were idiots at that age. When you're 20, you're barely out of your diapers. And we can hardly take care of ourselves. So the idea of taking care of another life was horrifying. The fact that we were midway through our undergraduate careers was waiting on us. She knew what she wanted to do. So we made this decision to abort the fetus quickly. It didn't take long for us to agree that this was what we wanted to do. She already knew what she wanted to do, and I just agreed with her, and it wasn't like we debated it much. So here we were in Japan, and her parents were living there. So you would think she at least would have support, but she couldn't go to them with this. There was a lot of stigma from where she came from. This would have been outrageous to them. Part of it was that she was raised Catholic. It was really scary. Still, we were young and dumb and a little reckless, obviously. I felt very responsible for this. There's only one way that this happens, and so we went through this together, completely together. So I found another international phone booth to talk to my father about it. At the time, I didn't have any money. I was living on a shoestring, trying to teach English as much as possible to get some spending money. So my father lent us the money to go get this done, and we did. But my father, he was a remarkable guy, and I miss him terribly. His reaction afterwards was one I'll never forget for as long as I live. He said to me, "Now you have to help both of you rediscover that intimacy is a good thing and that you should not be scared of it." Yeah, he's an amazing guy. And my father had a tremendous depth and sensitivity, and as a lawyer, he was always thinking about what's the next 3 steps, not just what you're doing right now. And so that was the advice he gave to me as his son. It didn't take her a long time to find a reputable place for us to go. In Japan, it's relatively easy to get an abortion, and she found us a place to do that. So, instead of going to Hong Kong on spring break, I came back to Tokyo, and the 2 of us went to this clinic. It was early in the pregnancy. It was not mid or late term ordeal, but it was still scary as hell. We went to the clinic she chose in Tokyo. It was not a hospital, it was a clinic. I remember going into almost a walk-up type of a building. It wasn't like going into an office building 7 stories high and taking an elevator, but it was a doctor's office. I have a very distinct memory of that day, and a lot of it's kind of lost with time, but there's one thing that I will always remember. Afterwards, when we were both in a room together, a very little sweet kind of room for recovery, I remember she was lying on a Western bed. It may have been a futon, maybe with a small frame. And I'll never forget this. It's one of the funniest things I've ever said, given the context. So here we are, and she's in bed resting. It's all over. In a little bit, we're going to leave there and just get on a train and go back to the other side of Tokyo, back to school. When a nurse brings in a little tray and leaves it by the window. It's full of tea, those little cookies, wafers, crackers kind of thing. And so she's drinking the tea, and she takes a bite of one of those little crumpet type things. And I take a bite of one, and it's delicious. They're so good. And I said to her, "My God, these are awesome. We should come back here." Like it was a restaurant. And she laughed in that whole different pitch again. It just broke all the tension. And that's all I was looking to do. Just kind of use that little humor to break the tension. And every week after, we giggled about that for a long time. I remember that just so distinctly. There wasn't any stigma at all there for an abortion. No stigma at all. They were lovely and they were caring and took care of us. They certainly had a process. And we were not there for an overly long time. But there was no stigma, not at the clinic. I cared very much about her. We kept on dating through our senior years in college. Then our programs with school ended. We each went back to our respective undergraduate colleges here in America. But I continued to see her. I went out to her campus a couple of times during my senior year. And because her family was still in Japan, she came to my parents' house for Thanksgiving. Just before graduation, I went out west to stay with her while I was looking at graduate schools. It was during that trip that we ended up breaking up. I decided I was going to go back to Japan for a program there, and she was staying and going to work for a tech firm here. That company back then, it was a startup, a relatively young company. Now, it's a monster. That was going to be, thousands of miles away in Japan. And she was going to be in America, in the Bay Area. Both of us working extremely hard and long hours, It just didn't make sense. It just kind of became the end. At my orientation in Tokyo, she happened to be there visiting her parents. I met her for dinner, and that was probably the last time we saw each other in person. After that, as the years passed by, we lost touch with each other. Every once in a while, because of, Facebook and social media stuff, every once in a while, we'd just check in on each other. I have not talked to her for years, and it's a bit It's a big deal. I don't know how many people she's ever told. I don't know if she's ever got married. I'm pretty sure I told my wife all this while we were dating, before we were engaged. That experience was probably one of the most scariest moments of my young life, for sure. Probably in my entire life. But it's also something that if you're going to get serious with somebody, you should talk about. At least that's just the way I think about it. When I had children, and I have 3, each of them midway through their college careers traveled and studied at least a semester abroad. And each time, before they left, I told them about my story and talked to them before they went abroad about my story. And that it was important that they be careful in what they're doing and who they're doing it with. And because the consequences could be enormous. But the important thing was, in being honest with my kids about my own experience, I wanted them to feel like they could always be honest with me, that we should always have that kind of open line of communication. I told my oldest her second semester of her junior year before she left to Hungary. I know she was surprised to know that, but she's also my super progressive daughter. All 3 of my kids are rather progressive, but she's like the standard bearer. So I think she felt like it was kind of an empowering story for her. I just wanted her to know that, look, neither her mother or I were naive to think that she wasn't sexually active and that these things actually do happen. They're not just stories. In telling her this, because it happened to her dad, and if I had the potential of completely and entirely torpedoing my life and having something like that change everything, that you have to be careful. Life will always teach you a lesson. Today's episode was produced by Rob Wallace and myself. We want to thank the person who shared this event and his journey through it all with us. It's really rare that you get a man's perspective of an experience that, as he put it, one of the scariest moments of his life. His recollections and insights remind us that there are good things that can come out of any situation. Do you have an event or an experience in college that shaped the rest of your life? We'd love to talk to you about it. We're looking to share other significant experiences that may have occurred outside of a class or lecture, but still taught us some of life's most meaningful lessons. If you had any reactions to our episode or our podcast, let us know. The feedback helps us shape and structure what we do here. Until then, I'm Pete Griffith, back next week with more stories like this, all from a time once in college.